I'm just going to say this is Hy McComish interviewing Don and Sharon Lanier, and it's June 26, 2009. Was your grandmother and grandfather the first Merritts to come in here to this area?
Yep.
When did they come in?
I think 1906. I think when it was when they come in, and then they had the two oldest girls, Aunt Sadie and Aunt Betty, they brought with them, and then my mom was the next one born. She was born in 1912 up there.
Well, what was your mom's name?
Nellie. Yeah, and then after that they had Stub and Stella. Stub Merritt and Stella Critchfield.
How did they survive, or what did they do?
Grandpa, they had cattle and stuff, and then when he done a lot of work for like the dredge up there, the one on Stanley Creek.
Yeah.
He cut firewood for them. He cut 100 cord of wood a year for the dredge with a crosscut and an axe. Then when the forest was started and stuff, he worked for just odd jobs around and stuff. But they had cattle most of the time.
How did they survive the winters?
Mainly, Grandma said they went out in the fall before it snowed them in. It'd take 3 days to go to Haley. It took 1 day to go from Stanley to the foot of the summit, and 1 day to get over the summit, and then 1 day on into Haley. And then after they'd been there a while, they got I think she said a Model T or a Model A truck, and they could make it in 1 day. But they always went out in the fall and brought in stuff enough to keep them through the winter, salt and flour and sugar, everything else. And then they go out early enough to get produce like peaches and stuff. She canned everything.
How about the cattle? How did they feed them?
He put up hay all in the summer, and then he fed them all winter. Grandpa just liked to build. He had a barn for the horses, he had a barn for the cows, and they had a spring house, what they called them back then, where they put the milk in the water to keep it cool in the summertime and stuff. But then they had underground cellars they kept everything in too.
Did they use sleds at all to take?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. When we lived right there by Grandma's place.
Yeah.
And Dad had some horse. I got some pictures of it. He built on just two runners. He built a big sled with enclosed, had a little stove in it, and they trained a team that would take the kids to school in the morning into Stanley, and then they turned the horses loose and they'd come back to home, and then about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Dad would go harness them up again. They'd go back to town and get the kids. The horses would go by themselves.
Is that right?
Yeah. But it was a little, it was just closed in with a canvas top on it, but it had a wood stove in it so they could keep warm.
Tell him what your brothers did, though.
Yeah. Well, Mom said one morning they'd sent the kids to school and they were watching. They were sitting there at the table watching, and Dad had got the binoculars. The horses come halfway back from town and stopped, and he was getting mad because he's gonna have to get his snowshoes on to go get them. And he said they sit there for a long time watching, and pretty quickly seen this smoke coming out of the stove again. And one of my brothers was playing hooky, and he made the team stop because he didn't want to go home because he knew he was going to get in trouble. But he got in a lot of trouble when Dad had to snowshoe out and get him. Dad and Uncle Webb, they homesteaded out at Cape Horn.
And when they homesteaded, did they then perfect it, or did they end up owning the land outright?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. When their mom died, they moved in closer to town.
To Stanley?
Yeah.
Sadie had your mother. Where did she live?
Well, they lived in a couple of different places there. They lived there on Crooked Creek for a while.
Uh-huh.
And then Dad and Mom bought 200 acres right there from Niece's. And then when Mom and Dad sold out in 1948, they kept a half acre there. And Selby Hansen bought Dad out, and then I think it was about 53, I think it was, he bought the rest bought Uncle Stub out.
Well, where did you go to school?
I went to school here in Chalice.
Okay.
Yeah, all my brothers and sisters, except for my younger sister, went to school in Stanley.
Did you ever go hunting in Stanley?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we was up there every summer.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
How was that as an experience?
It was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Elk?
Yeah, well, there wasn't too many elk until the last 20 years or so. Then the elk got pretty thick up there, but there was a lot of deer and everything around. A lot of squirrels. We go up there shooting squirrels all the time. Yeah, a lot of coyotes. Yeah, Stub and Bella, I think they moved out of there. Well, they sold Grandma's place there where you're at, and then they moved up to Obsidian. Bella was Dave Merritt's or Dave Williams's daughter, and Dave gave every one of them kids 160 acres. When they sold Grandma's place, then Stub and Bella moved up there to Obsidian, and they stayed there until I don't know what was it. It was about 65, I think, when they left there. They sold out just before the Scenic Easements come in. They moved to Montana.
Sharon, what about your background? When did you come to the area here?
Both sides of my family came in the mid-1890s. On my grandfather's side, his mother and dad came in here from Ohio. They went to Montana first, and he was actually born in Montana, and his dad's name was George Holzel.
Were they all up in Bonanza at that time?
No, they didn't go to Bonanza. They were more the farmer type. In fact, my grandfather, they grew a bunch of cabbages. He had taken them to Salmon to sell, and he was on his way back in the place they called Midway between here and Salmon. A horse was lame, and they figure he got off to look at the horses and got kicked in the head, and it killed him. But Grandpa wasn't very old at the time, and my grandfather, when he got bigger, when him and my grandmother got married, they had a ranch out here. I think it's
east of town.
Yeah. They had that for a long time, but he did more mining too, and she liked to tell stories about him because things were tough. It was the 30s and that, and she said once they didn't have money for the taxes. They had a little bit of money, but not enough to pay the taxes, so he went to town and gambled and won enough money to come home. He was pretty lucky, didn't he?
Very lucky.
Yeah. But he didn't do it very often, but when they needed some money, he'd go to town and gamble.
Well,
they made beer during Prohibition and sold it.
When Grandma and Grandpa first come to Stanley, they were headed for big old Montana. And when they got to Redfish Lake, Grandma told Grandpa that they were going to have to spend a few days because she had to wash diapers and stuff because she had 2 little kids with Aunt Sadie and Aunt Betty. And so they camped at Redfish, and they had a guy that was traveling with them from Jackson's Hole. Well, he told Grandma and Grandpa he was going to take the horse and go on in, one of the horses go on into Stanley and see what was there, and stuff. But when he got to Stanley, there was an old guy that they used to pal around with over in Jackson's Hole. His name was John Cherry, and he was in Stanley. And when this, I can't remember what the guy's name was that was riding Grandpa's horse that was with him. When he come into Stanley, Cherry pulled a gun on him and wanted to know where he got that horse. He said, "That's Bill Merritt's horse." No, where'd you get it? And the guy started, he's at Redfish. He's at Redfish. So he took him back to Redfish, and where that spring is as you're going out of Stanley up towards Redfish. It's about halfway between Stanley and the ranger station. Well, back up that draw, if you look back up in there's a little old cabin part of it. It's all caved in now.
Yeah.
Well, that's where Cherry and his partner were living, and Grandma and Grandpa stayed there with him that year, that winter.
Sharon, how did you and Don get together?
My folks moved away when my dad was in mining, and when the mines shut down here in the 50s, we moved to Utah for a while, and then when we came back, my grandmother's husband had died, and she's lonesome, and she asked me to stay with her. So I just saw him. I actually worked with his mother in the cafe, but that's not how I met him. I just saw him uptown.
Now, where was the schoolhouse?
Okay, that'd be, where Harris they got that motel there now. As you go into Stanley, like you're going to the airport, and you go down to Main Street to the schoolhouse, is that little log building that was right there. And then they built a Quonset right in front of it.
That's right.
Yeah, the Quonset was later, but the log building was to start with, was the school. After they quit using the log building for the school, they used it for the teachers that lived in it.
Okay.
Whoever they had teaching school up there lived in it. Once they, for years and years and years, Maddie Hanson, Cliff's mom, and Phyllis Williams were the teachers, and they both lived there. But after they quit teaching and they started bringing teachers in, then they lived in that old school. the old log school.
Is that right?
But all the kids after they only went to the 8th grade in Stanley, and then they used to have a dormitory over here to the school over here, and the kids from Stanley, the kids from Cobalt, and some of these outer places all stayed in the dorm during the week, and then they'd go home on weekends.
Now you have how many brothers?
I got 4 brothers and 5 sisters. Yeah, there was 10 of us. I'm the next youngest.
Next to the youngest.
Yeah.
And you have brothers that live in the area here.
Yeah, I got one brother that lives in Leslie down here by Mackey, and I got one that lives in Idaho Falls, one that lives in Fairfield, and one that lives in Twin. He died. And then I got a sister that lives, Dean lives in Burley, Louise lives in Twin Falls, and then her twin sister Lucille lived in Alaska, and then my other sister Bonnie lived in Malta. So we were all right close.
Do you ever get together and just?
Oh yeah, every 2 years we have a big reunion. The last time we used to have it up at Stanley. The last time we've been having it here the last 4 or 5 years. And I go up and mow the pasture, and then they bring their camp trailers and stuff and stay for 3 or 4 days.
Okay.
But we had it up Stanley for a long time. But usually anymore it's so dry and they won't let you have a campfire or nothing. So we just said, heck, let's have it here. But last time I think there was about 90 of us showed up. You've heard of Trapper Fisher?
Yes.
He lived out there with Grandma and Grandpa for a long time.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
His cabin is out there.
Yeah. Well, that cabin that Fury's got, that he calls the Trapper's cabin, that was the government Trapper's cabin.
There's a cabin just downstream.
Okay, that was Fisher's. Yeah, that was Fisher's.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, he lived there with Grandma and Grandpa for a long, long time.
Did he?
Yeah. My brothers would always tell me that he'd go to town, he'd buy hard candy, But if they went over by themselves, he'd give them a piece of candy, but he made them stay there so the rest of them would know they had it. Yeah, somewhere, if I can find it, I found Dad's wallet here a few years ago, and he got out house logs and posts and poles and whatever, and he had a deal in there where he'd brought a load of poles down, traded it for a cow. And then he had some posts he traded for a pig and all kind of more barter system than because nobody had any money back then. But I remember, I still got part of it. He had a big saw rig for blocking firewood, and he had a tractor with the pulley on it, and they ran them big flat belts. And I can remember when I was a little kid, they went all over. Everybody get their wood, and then they'd have big, huge piles, and they'd saw it all up and go to one guy's place one day and saw, and the next day they'd go to another place and saw. And Glenn Brewer had the bar there in town. What do you call it? Rod Gun Club, I think.
Yes,
was Glenn's, and God, he burnt a 25, 30 cord of wood a year in that thing. He'd have a pile of wood you couldn't see over, and they'd all cut, and then they'd have a big dinner, and it was pretty neat.
Was he the original owner of the Rod and Gun?
I'm not sure.
When was this about?
No, this was in the 50s, early 50s and late 40s. I know there was the Alamo Club was owned by a guy named D.F. Martin. They called him.
Where was the Alamo Club?
It would be sitting behind McCoy's store.
Do you remember a building? If there was a building next to the post or next to the
where the post office?
Yeah.
Where the post office sit was called Ace Diamonds.
Yeah.
It was a dance hall and bar. I remember when I was a little kid, you go in there and they'd have Saturday night dances, and the floor would bounce when people got to dancing and stuff. It was pretty neat.
Where'd the bands come from?
All over. My dad played in there. He played the fiddle and the banjo. Bill Woolley. And he had an African lion, and it laid there. There used to be a bridge you went across right where the one is now. But they had it chained to the post over on the other side right there at the end of the bridge.
Yeah.
And you could hear it roaring all over. Yeah, they kept it they had it for years and years and years. But just before old Bill died, he had a pet bear that he'd caught a cub or something.
Yeah.
And in the wintertime when it would hibernate, he'd get tired of being there by himself, because he'd go drag the bear out and put him by the stove and thaw him out where he'd play with him.
You're kidding.
No, he always had something over there.
And did he have the property that Brett has now?
Well, yeah, he homesteaded that.
Yeah.
Or bought it or whatever. Yeah. But I think originally when he first come to the country, I think Grandma said he was up to Redfish Lake. And then he gave that up and went down to where he was.
And he would be the father then of Brett Woolley.
No, he'd be Brett's grandpa.
Oh, Brett's grandpa. Okay.
Yeah.
What did they raise cattle up there?
Yeah, they had cattle and a few sheep, you know, and then he had a pack outfit. Old Bill Woolley did.
Well, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Sure.